This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every week, it's the world famous Robb Reinhold.
I don't know about world famous, but I will take mildly famous thanks to you. I was a nobody before your Trading Psychology Podcast. Well, I wasn't a nobody, but just a few people knew me. But I got to say, I love the interaction that I get to have with people. I mean, I've always had that with a close group of traders, but it's really nice to get interaction with people. I've got a lot of your traders now over at our YouTube channels at Maverick Trading and Maverick Currencies. So, drop me a message. I'd love to respond to you.
Well, you ran one of the biggest prop firms in the United States. I would say that's probably something. But either way, I see what you're saying. Yeah, as far as global exposure, it's good to give you a little bit of that. Well deserved. Now, we spoke in the previous episode, or one of the previous episodes, about how this episode may be coming up soon, and here it is. And this was actually, for those of you who've been with the No Nonsense Forex channel for a long time, you remember this was an old episode of the Forex Q&A podcast. It was its own dedicated episode, episode 59, I think, if you want to go back to it. But we're going to cover a lot of things we probably covered there. I actually don't remember even what I was talking about back then. But also get Robb's take on it, which we have found through this program is supremely beneficial when added on to mine as well. So desperation is something that I hope most people at this stage are not experiencing a lot of. Because I can tell you, Robb, that when I first started the channel, my audience was very different. My audience now is smaller, but they are experienced for the most part. Even though I do get a lot of new people, it just seems like I'm not getting so much of the nonsense I was getting early on back in 2018 and 2019 when the channel was really blowing up. Because I think people saw there's this new Forex trading channel. He's doing things a different way. Maybe this is my ticket out. And so I was getting a lot of people who really were not in good positions. And when you're not in a good position, you get desperate. And when you're desperate, you don't really, well, at least you don't feel like you have time to play the long game, because that's just not what's going on in your life. It's brutal. I remember it was a tweet, I think. I don't know if it's an actual quote, but it was, when you're in poverty, everything's a crisis. And I felt that. Not because I don't think I've ever been in like real poverty. I've been broke before. And when I was experiencing that myself, yeah, I was certainly set off by a lot more things that I'm set off by now. That's a problem, because when you're set off by things, that makes your emotions go up. And often it stays there. And that is not the frame of mind you want when you're trying to trade.
This reminds me of one of my favorite sayings, that it's really hard to plan your future when you're currently drowning. And look, I know that's a sensational analogy, but think about it. When you're drowning, it's immediate. You are not even able to think about what's going to happen next weekend, what's going to happen next month. That is not anywhere close to what you're thinking. So when you get in that area of desperation, when you get into that low, your brain literally will not allow you to spend any mental energy on things that are abstract, because you are literally drowning at the moment. If you are, again, in poverty, and I'm gonna tell a story, and this is gonna be really lame, but I love to experiment with fitness and with diets. And I remember doing this HCG diet years ago, where I could only eat it was 300 calories a day, and it was cabbage. I could eat as much cabbage as I wanted, but that was at 300 calories a day. And I did it the first couple of days. I was fine, and all of a sudden, somewhere around day 4 or 5. I can't think about anything other than food. And look, I am not motivated by food. I'm not a foodie. I don't really get any enjoyment out of food. I eat food to survive, and I eat my macros every day. I eat my right amount of macros. I get no enjoyment from it whatsoever, but it keeps me alive and it hits my targets. But all I could think of was food. That's it. And I remember sitting on my couch, and I'm looking over at my pantry, which I had young kids at the time, so it's just full of food. And for the first time in my life, I realized that there are people in my exact situation that didn't have a pantry to look over to. This wasn't self-induced. This wasn't self-induced because you're trying an experiment. This is real life. And I really got a very good glimpse, and again, just a small glimpse into what it really means to go hungry. And I have started donating to food bank programs and stuff after that because I realized this is people's current situation, and I couldn't think of anything other than food. That was it. So again, that desperation is so difficult because you are literally, your brain will not allow you to consider abstract thoughts about things like future and future growth and success. That's gone. Right here is all that matters.
That makes me think of some of the email correspondence I would get, especially back then. It was from 3 very distinct parts of the world. Let's just say that. I'm not going to name places. But where poverty was certainly a thing, a very overriding thing in those cultures, I'm sure. But they were all very specific. It's almost like they were all going off the same script. In one area, it was always, please, you must help me. That, I swear, I've seen that phrase in my email box, Rob, probably 50 times. And I still get it today, just not nearly as often as I did before. And they want to talk to me on the phone, and of course I don't do that. But, they probably want me to stop everything I'm doing and walk them through everything. And to which I would say, no, that's extremely lazy. I'm not doing that for anybody else. Why should I do that for you? Go away. Now, I wouldn't say in those words, but that's what I was thinking every time I got one of those. And then there was another part of the world that just always wanted to put me to work. If you guys don't remember, I used to answer one question for anybody who wanted to ask it. I was like, you only get one, so take advantage of it. There was a certain part of the world that just wasn't having any of that. They took advantage of my time, and I resented them for that, not really even considering the situation they were in. Actually, with that part of the world, I don't regret that. Yeah, screw those people. And then there was another part of the world where they didn't want my personal help. They just wanted my personal system, and they said they would take it from there, which is something I said I wasn't going to do when I started the channel, and I stuck to that. And I got it a lot, and it was annoying. And I was like, let's just please get these people off my channel. They're not here for the right reasons. And, it's kind of a conundrum, Rob, in my brain because, one, they were not there for the right reasons. My channel probably, at least at the time, really wasn't for them because this is where their headspace was. But at the same time, I kind of struggle with this in my own brain because, they probably could have used my system more than anybody else, because this is something they really needed. I see why scams were so popular in these parts of the world back then, because when you're in that space, you will do anything to get out of it. So I was really torn.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because, as I said, when you get to that point, you have to fix the immediate issue, and the desperation will make you do everything. It's that old philosophical question where if you have a child and your child is dying and there's a medication that can save your child, but it costs $1 million, do you steal that medication? Now, my answer without thinking is absolutely yes. And people say, but Rob, you'll go to prison. I'm like, I know. Fully understand, fully know that there's going to be consequences. But yeah, I would act totally different than who I am as a person. Like, I don't believe in stealing. I don't steal. But in that situation, I would absolutely steal. Why? Because the need was so immediate. And I think that's all you're finding, is you're finding people when they get into that period of desperation, they act in ways that they wouldn't act. And then when you get a person out of that situation, they're a much more reasonable, friendly, nice, kind person. That's what I found in the world.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm glad I handled things the way I did. I try to be as nice as I can. But there was no way I was handing over my system because at the end of the day, it would not have helped them. Because when you're in this headspace, you could have the actual Holy Grail in your hand. You could have a system, and I think you and I have talked about this, that has a 90% success rate. And it wouldn't matter. You would still find a way to screw it up. That's how powerful this is. Now, do you have any stories? I mean, I'm sure you have to, being in this industry as long as you have, and actually having personal interactions to where you actually call these people on the phone. I would never do that. But, obviously, it's I feel like it's your responsibility to keep people from jumping off of their own bridge here. And I'm really curious to if do you have any stories that like really stand out when it comes to this particular subject?
I definitely have a different relationship with my traders than you would have with, someone who is a YouTube follower. My relationships are much more personal. And not only do I have a lot of stories, I have hundreds of stories. I had to think about which one of the hundreds I really wanted to share. And two really come to mind. This was early on in Maverick trading. We're talking like back in right around 1999, 2000. And one of our traders, he was awesome. He was our best trader. When he became a trader for Maverick, he was in a situation where he was wrapping up his father's estate. His father has passed, and he had moved up to his father's estate to handle all the things. And so during the first year, he was in a place that he didn't need to pay for. He was staying at the house. He had very few bills. He had very few responsibilities. And he was really good. I mean, he was good in the fact that he took the losses when he needed to. He kept the gains when they were really running for him. He did everything right. So after a period of time when all his personal stuff was all wrapped up, he decided he was going to go buy a house, make a move, get engaged, all these things. And I swear it was really within the space of a few weeks. He went from one of the best traders I've ever seen to one of the worst traders I've ever seen. And we had a lot of talks about this. And he said, Robb, all I see now are bills when I trade. He says, I look at this gain I've got, and I say, oh, that covers my mortgage. If I sell it here, I cover that mortgage. And I see this over here. And he was no longer trading for anything. He was desperate to make his monthly bills because that's what was on his mind.
So you're saying that's not how he was before then. What was his life like before that?
Oh, his life before was he didn't have any bills. He had very few bills. And so when he approached the market, he was carefree. He was free to trade if he wanted to. He was free to not trade if he didn't want to. If he sat down one day and looked at the market and said, ugh, I don't like this market, I'm going to come back in a couple of weeks, he did it. And that's why he was good, is because he had that attitude. But once he got into this headspace where he had all these things to meet, all of these obligations, he could no longer take a week off. He had to sit down and he had to trade because he had to make X amount of money to pay the bills this week, or else he wasn't going to make it. And he put himself in that situation. And we talked about it, and it was actually quite sad because he ultimately could not get himself out of that situation. And we both agreed that it was best for him to step back for a bit. He did come back, but it definitely was a difficult situation for him.
Yeah, so the moral of the story there is if you have bills, you can still trade. Like we always say, just make sure it's money you can afford to lose. But I think fair to say with this guy, Rob, it wasn't the fact that he had bills. It was the change from the total mindset change from not having to worry about it to all of a sudden having to worry about it again that really messed him up. Yeah,
exactly. And as we said earlier, it's let's just take the two mindsets. The before mindset of, hey, everything's easy. Everything's, I don't have any bills. I can do what I want. To the mindset of, oh my gosh, I have to make this payment today. We just talked about this concept of drowning. And look, he wasn't drowning. He was still fine as far as financial, but in his mind, he could not see past the mortgage payment. He could not see past the car insurance. He could not see past that. So what happened was he went from being like, hey, you know what? I don't care what I make this week. I don't care what I make this month because all I care about is what I make for the year, and I'm going to trade when I want. And then if I don't like the market, I'm not going to trade. And then all of a sudden he went to only being able to see like literally a couple days in front of him. Literally couldn't see past the trade that he was making right now, where before he did that so well. And that's what that desperation does. As I said, your brain shuts off any brain power of thinking about the future because it's all about consuming today. What's immediate to me right here, right now. And in trading, that is just a really negative thing.
All right, so that's certainly one situation. I mean, you could probably tell stories all day, I'm sure. But maybe give us one more that's different from that, because I'm sure you got plenty.
I do have another one. And I really thought about, we get so hyper fixated on money. And yes, money is a huge thing. And when you don't have money, it is the hugest thing. And here's the really cool thing, and I'm going way off script here, but I think this is so fascinating. They've done tons of studies about compensation. And Patrick, I'm going to have you link this study down below because I think it's so fascinating. When people aren't making enough money, if you want to motivate them with money. Motivate them with bonuses. Like if you are a boss and you want to get better results, motivate them with money. Right around 70,000. Now look, this was 70,000 5 years ago, so that's more like 90,000 here in the US. Right around $90,000, you stopped getting a benefit by motivating your employees with more money, with bonuses. And at a certain point, it was somewhere right up around like 150,000. You started to get worse performance if you offered them a monetary bonus. You actually got worse performance. It was not a motivating factor. It was actually demotivating to them because they had enough. So not having enough money makes you very desperate. But once you have enough, money isn't all that important. So I wanted to think about a story I have that was different than just, I'm broke. I need to trade my way out of being broke. How do I do that? It reminded me of a story probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I had a trader. He was really good. He had moved up the levels, done well. And all of a sudden, just started trading very erratically. Started trading a lot more. Started trading erratically. Took some losses. And I finally said, hey, I need to get on the phone and see what's going on. So I called him up and I said, hey, what's going on? I said, Robb, I know you're calling about my trading. I know. I said, no, listen, let's not talk about that. I said, what's going on in your personal life? Silence. He said, how did you know? I'm like, you know what? He's like, yeah, I'm going through a divorce. Just found out my wife was cheating on me. And I'm really struggling at the moment. And so we talked. We talked about that. And he told me that the only time he didn't think about his current situation and his current divorce was when he was trading, because trading took his mind off it. So he was sitting there all day long, making trades, all so he would not feel the pain that comes with a situation like that. And so, like I said, the money one is, I got a ton of stories with the money, but this one was different. This was, someone trading to get out of the immense pain they're feeling right here, right now, as a way to escape the situation, and using trading as a crutch as a way to escape. Again, not a good situation. We talked and we decided, hey, look, because he knew that if he kept trading, it would only lead to losses. I agreed that it would only lead to losses. So we decided, hey, let's have you step back. Let's get your personal life in order. And then when it's all done, let's welcome you back with open arms and get you going there. That is, again, it's not a monetary one, but someone trading out of desperation to not feel the pain that they're going through in their life. Really, the whole moral of this episode is you got to be trading for the right reasons. And if you're not trading for the right reasons, it's going to bring all of the psychological problems that we've talked about on all the episodes we do. They're all going to be right in your face, and your brain is not going to be in the headspace to be able to handle them, and you will have losses.
And on top of that, let's think about what this ends up doing to you and your account in particular. First of all, we just got done talking about the wonders of compound interest. Well, say goodbye to that, because if you're trading just to pay bills and your situation's so bad that you need that money, even if you get lucky and you make it, you're not winning, and you're never going to. And so that's really tough. Now, if you were to make enough to pay bills every month, that would be one thing. But as anybody who's traded this market for any amount of time can tell you, that is not how it works. You are going to take negatives. So in your mind, you think, well, I can trade my way out of this bad situation. but that's only if you're positive all the time. And you're going to have long stretches, especially early on in your career, where that is not going to be the case. So now you're only making a bad situation worse. Is there anything else apart from the two things I've said, Rob, that you can add on to that as far as what this desperation actually does to you in your account?
Not really. It's a very sad situation because I always like to give alternatives. And throughout all of our episodes we've done, Patrick, you are the black and white person. You're like, okay, look, you just need to do this or not do it. And that's always the correct answer. That's always the correct answer. But I'm more shades of gray where I understand, hey, people aren't binary and not everything is binary. There are some things you can do in the middle. You can take half position sizes. You can do this. But I'm absolute on this one. You just cannot trade when you're desperate. I'm sorry. Now, look, you're going to do all these mental gymnastics in your mind to try to say, but this time it's different. You just need to understand your brain literally cannot do what you're asking it to do when you're drowning. The only thing you can do is work on not drowning, not trading. You cannot trade while you're drowning. So I'm very absolute on this one. You have to take a break.
Yeah, that drowning was such a good metaphor, and I 100% agree. And this is going to be really tough because you're also going to feel like, well, I would really like to become a professional trader in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, and I feel like I'm not making any progress if I just don't trade. Well, you're right, but what you can also do, the beautiful thing about trading, is you can trade a demo account, and you can test systems. And you can do that in the meantime. This is something it's a step that desperate people usually skip anyway, which is stupid because you're not going anywhere if you can't do this part. So I guess as far as solutions go, don't trade as one. It's not what somebody wants to hear. But on the flip side of that, you can still curate the system you will be using for the rest of your life, or at least a variation of it. So you don't have to be completely unproductive here. There's a lot you can do. And let me tell you, the system building and everything like that was, as far as my trading career goes, the most exciting time of my career. Because once you get to the actual trading part, that's when reality sets in and things get real, and that's less fun. And two, it's like anything. The journey there is just the most fun part. So it doesn't always have to be bad. If you have the self-awareness to realize that you are just not in the right headspace or the right financial space to start trading for real, then that's fine. Work on something like that. Hell, if you never get to that point and you're always in this desperate situation, and if you put together something really great that trades really well on demo, you can sell it. There's a lot of different ways you can go. But the one thing Rob and I really don't want you to do is to trade actual money or, God forbid, somebody else's money while you were in this situation, even if your hope is that someday it's going to get you out of this situation.
100% agree. And Patrick, I've been running risk management for 2 decades. And let me just go through what that exactly means. Because, okay, risk management, I don't know what just popped into your brain, but let me be really clear on what risk management is. When I have a trader that's losing, and they're losing their money, they're losing firm's money, and I have to reach out to them and try to get them to stop. Try to get them to stop trading because they're on tilt. Now, when you're on tilt, you don't know you're on tilt, but you are. And again, we've talked about tilt on the poker table, where you literally cannot see that you are the one, you are responsible for the losses, not the market, not anything, you. It's now you that are responsible. Risk management is calling somebody in that situation where they've had a string of losses and they're now at a point where this one's got to work or this one, or else they're going to have to step back. And you have to call that person up and talk to them and get them to understand that if they keep trading, they'll just lose more. I want you to put yourself in that situation, in the situation of a risk manager, where you've got to call your friend and try to get them to stop being on tilt and to step off of the poker table. It's an extremely sensitive, difficult decision. And people always say, but Robb, the McClellan oscillator has never been this low since 1991. I know it's coming. And they will give you all sorts of different excuses. But my job is to get them to step back, cut the stimulus, cut the position. And again, I use the term stuck. People get stuck in positions. They had these plans, they didn't follow the plans, and now the trade is so far against them, they literally are stuck. They can't get out. My job and risk manager's job is to go into that situation and try to get the person to take the positions down, move back to cash, let everything settle, build them back up, and then start them trading again. But there's some times where they don't want to do it, and they refuse to do it. And then you have to go in and make the decision to cut it. That's a very, very difficult thing to be in charge of, and to do it correctly and to do it in a loving, supportive manner is also very difficult. And then some traders just make it very difficult to begin with because they don't believe they're wrong. They believe that this is just a temporary thing. That's desperation. And I've seen it. I've been on the other side of it. I've been stuck in a position. I remember early on, one of our risk managers had to take me out of a position, and I fought him over it. Can you believe that, Patrick?
Impossible.
It absolutely happened. So look, we all get to that point, and that's why just having a risk management department is so important. I call it forced discipline. When you aren't disciplined enough to do it, 100 times out of 100 times, you need someone to go in and do it for you. It's called forced discipline. No one loves it. No one likes it. But it's absolutely necessary if you don't have just perfect position management rules. And if you're still struggling with it, I highly recommend if you don't get yourself a risk manager at a prop firm, get someone who you're accountable to. Get somebody who will actually slap you upside the head if you don't get out of positions that you should have. It's really important because as the process of learning trading, you can't do it all the time, and you're going to get to that point of desperation. You have to be able to recognize it, or you need someone else to help you recognize it. That's the job of a risk manager in a nutshell. It is not a fun job.
And I love that solution. The only issue is a lot of people aren't going to be able to utilize that because you're not going to have a guy like Robb coming down and saving you when you need to be saved. You're not always going to have somebody there that, one, cares, or two, even understands what the hell's going on, that's going to be able to do the same thing. So the only all-encompassing solution I can think of is something we've talked about before, and it's the hardest thing to do, and no matter what we say, if you just don't have it, you don't have it, and that is self-accountability. If you guys remember all the way to when I was talking about journaling, the most important section in your journal is the comments section, where you have to be very honest with yourself and say, yes, I made this mistake because I was doing this incorrectly, or because I was thinking this incorrectly. And if over time that comments section gets bigger instead of smaller, well, then you really need to stop and reevaluate what you're doing. Maybe you can't just trade your way out of something like that. So this is really the same thing, because like Robb said, everybody wants to kick and scream and say that, it's just a moment of drawdown. It's nothing else. But if there's desperation there, it's going to continue to be drawdown. It's just going to be a downward spiral all the way to the bottom. Now, Robb, do you have anything to close with before we wrap it up here?
As always, I do. And I want to go back to, yes, you may not have a risk manager, but there are absolutely things you can do. And the first thing that popped into my mind when I was young and I was into poker in my, very early 20s, and I would experience what I considered a bad beat on the table. So here was my plan. My plan was I would only have so much money on the table. Now, if you understand how poker works, when you go all in, and all in means you have to go all in. So let's say that I've got $200 on the table, and Patrick, you have $300 on the table, and Patrick goes all in. The only way for me to stay in that hand is for me to go all in. I don't need to meet his 300. I just have to put all the chips on the table that are sitting there right now. What you are allowed to do is take chips off and put them in your pocket. So I always maintain a stack of chips that I thought was a reasonable amount to be able to go all in if I needed to, but not so big that it was such a big loss. And then I also experienced, after some bad beats, the dreaded $300 maximum withdrawal from an ATM over a 24-hour period. Patrick, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've never known it to be 300. Usually Vegas would love you to pull out as much as possible, but I've seen it just in everyday life when I was younger.
Patrick, you understand how old I am. I'm talking this is back in like 1992. So yeah, they had a $300 daily limit of cash. So even if I like had a bad beat, so I purposely went with a set amount of money, and then knowing like if I was an idiot, I could go get $300, but I wouldn't bring any more money. I wouldn't give myself any more ways to get any more money for a 24-hour period, because I knew, hey, you might go on tilt, you might screw it up. So there are absolutely ways you can risk manage yourself, but you have to recognize and realize you are human. You might go on tilt. If you don't have good risk management now, there are absolutely ways you can set up ways to where you can't be an idiot. Again, we talked about having multiple accounts. We've talked about, having, security cards and stuff like that. There are things that traders can do to be their own risk managers. It might be a little weird and a little crazy, but there are absolutely things you can do to be your own risk manager, as long as you are self-aware enough to know that you need it. If you think you don't need it, then I really can't help you, because you're going to have to find out the hard way. So that's really my advice, that if you want to be on guard for when you do get to a point where you are desperate, think about that in advance. Think about, how can I do it? How can I protect against myself in those times where I'm going to take a bad beat, get desperate? What can I do to where I don't lose it all? I know that's paranoia, but guess what? That's how you get to the big leagues, is you are constantly on guard against yourself.
And if you have to stop, if you have to strictly trade demo, then that's just what you have to do. You have to think what's best for your long-term prosperity. It's very romantic to sit there and say that I traded my way out of it even during the hard times, but that's not a very high percentage move. And you need every advantage you can in this market because the fail rate's so high. So that's what we're attempting to do here, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Trading Psychology Podcast. Rob and I will both see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.